The Dominion ruled 47 star systems. Their empire stretched across entire regions of space. Technology was thousands of years ahead of any other species. Their weapons could destroy entire planets. Their ships could travel between stars in days. The people believed they were the strongest beings in the universe. They had never been proven wrong. Queen Ara sat on her throne in the center of the Eternal Dominion, the largest warship ever built. The ship was 3 kilometers long. It carried 10,000 soldiers, 5,000 workers, and all the technology needed to control an empire. The queen looked out from her chamber at the stars beyond. Inside, she felt the weight of her power and the weight of her problems. The Council of Elders questioned her decisions every single day. They said she was too soft with conquered species. They said she spent too much money on projects that did not matter. They said she was not strong enough to lead the people. 3 years ago, she had been the most powerful being in the empire. Now, her power was slipping away like water through her fingers. The recent war with humanity had made things worse. Ships had found Earth by accident while exploring a new region of space. The planet was small and its people were primitive. They expected the humans to surrender immediately. They had sent a message to the human leaders: surrender now and join the Dominion. You will be safe. You will have food and shelter. You will serve the people. The humans said no. This shocked the commanders. No other species had ever refused they had always surrendered. They had always understood that fighting was useless, but humans were different. They did not understand that they could not win. They fought anyway. The war had lasted 4 years. Ships attacked human cities. Human forces fought back with weapons that should have been useless against technology, yet the humans continued to fight. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They sent their soldiers forward knowing they would probably die. They fought for their families. They fought for their planet. They fought because they could not accept living under rule. The lost 12 ships in that war. 12 ships. No one could believe it. Warships had defeated entire fleets from other species. But human pilots were creative. They used strategy that made no sense but worked. They sacrificed their lives to destroy one vessel. The commanders grew angry. They grew frustrated. They wanted to destroy all of humanity, but the Council of Elders said that destroying the entire species would waste valuable resources. Finally, the humans agreed to a peace agreement. They had lost most of their cities. Their oceans were poisoned. Their people were dying from hunger and sickness. They could not fight anymore. They accepted rule and became part of the empire. But the war had damaged Queen Ara's reputation. The council said she had allowed them to suffer losses. They said a stronger leader would have destroyed humanity completely and quickly. Now Queen Ara sat in her chamber and thought about how to fix her political position. She needed to do something bold. She needed to show the council that she was still strong. She needed to show them that she had vision and that her ideas worked better than their old, rigid ways of thinking. An idea came to her. It was risky, but it was brilliant. She would select a human male and make him her consort. She would take him from his world and bring him to her ship. She would train him. She would show the council that humans could be useful, that they could be integrated into the society, that her approach to dealing with conquered species was smarter than the old way. A human consort would prove her power. It would show that she could control even the wildest species. It would unite the empire behind her again. Queen Ara called for her military commander, General. When he arrived, she gave him his orders. Find the best human male from the conquered world. Bring him to the Eternal Dominion. He must be intelligent. He must be strong. He must be able to learn quickly. She did not care what he wanted. She did not care if he was willing. He would have no choice. He would become her consort whether he wanted to or not. General went to Earth with a team of soldiers and scientists. They searched through the human population. They looked at records of the war. They wanted to find a human who had shown leadership and ability. After 3 weeks of searching, they found him. His name was Grant. He had been a commander in the human military. He had led soldiers in battle. He had survived the entire war without dying. After the war ended, he had not caused any problems. He had not led rebellions. He had not tried to fight the again. He had accepted that the had won. He had accepted rule. This was exactly what Queen Ara wanted. General went to the place where Grant lived, was in a room with other humans. They were working, building structures that they needed. When saw the soldiers, he did not try to run. He did not try to fight. He stood and waited to see what they wanted. Told him, "You are chosen to serve the queen. You will go to the eternal dominion. You will learn ways. You will become the queen's consort." Asked what would happen if he refused. Answered simply, "You will die or you will come with us. The choice is yours, but there is only one choice that leads to your survival." Understood. He had survived the war by understanding what he could and could not change. He could not fight he could not win. His only choice was to survive, so he agreed. He gathered the few things that belonged to him and walked to the transport ship. The journey to the Eternal Dominion took 3 days. Sat in a small room with nothing to do. He thought about his life before the war. He thought about his family. He thought about the things he had lost. He thought about what would happen to him now. They wanted him to be the queen's consort. He did not understand what that meant exactly, but he knew it meant his life would change completely. When arrived at the Eternal Dominion, he was taken to quarters that were much better than anything he had expected. The rooms were large and clean. There was good food. There was running water. There were windows that looked out at the stars. The soldiers told him to rest. The queen would meet him soon. Sat on the edge of the bed and looked out at the stars. He was no longer a free man. He no longer had control over his own life, but he was alive. And as long as he was alive, there was a possibility of something changing. He had learned this in the war. Never give up. Never stop thinking. Never stop looking for an opportunity. Queen Ara came to meet him 3 days later. She examined him carefully. She looked at his face, his body, his eyes. She asked him questions about the war, about his military experience, about what he thought about answered every question honestly. He did not try to hide anything. He did not try to impress her. He simply answered. The queen smiled. It was a cold smile that did not show warmth or kindness. It showed satisfaction. She had chosen well. This human would serve her purpose. He would help her regain her position in the council. He would prove that her way of thinking about conquered species was correct. She welcomed him to his new life on her ship. She told him he would have everything he needed. He would be treated well, but he would belong to her. He would obey her. He would learn to serve the people. Bowed his head and accepted his fate. He did not know yet that he would change everything about how the queen understood power, strength, and what it meant to be. Grant spent the first 2 months on the Eternal Dominion learning the rules of society. He learned their language quickly. His brain worked fast, and he had always been good at learning new things. He studied the culture. He learned the protocols. He attended formal functions with Queen Ara. He stood beside her at dinners where the most powerful leaders came to eat and talk about empire business. To everyone who watched, appeared to be exactly what the queen had wanted. He was quiet and respectful. He did not complain. He did not ask for special treatment. He wore the clothes the queen gave him. He ate the food that was provided. He spoke when spoken to. He did not try to escape or cause trouble. The queen seemed satisfied with her choice, but was doing something else. While he was learning the language and the protocols, he was also watching. He was listening. He was paying attention to everything around him. He noticed how they treated other species who worked on the ship. He noticed how they spoke to conquered peoples. He noticed what they valued and what they did not care about. He saw patterns in their behavior. He understood their thinking. One day, asked the queen if he could use the ship's library. He wanted to learn more about history, he said. He wanted to understand her people better. The queen found this amusing. She granted his request. She thought it was funny that a human wanted to study knowledge. She believed that no human mind could truly understand wisdom, but she allowed it anyway. It would not hurt to let him try. In the library, discovered something important. They kept detailed records of everything. They recorded the history of every species they had conquered. They kept information about previous wars and previous rulers. They documented their own culture thoroughly. Spent hours reading. He read about past emperors and queens. He read about military strategies that had worked and strategies that had failed. He read about other species and how they had resisted rule. They did not hide this information from because they did not think it mattered. They believed that information alone could not threaten them. Knowledge was not the same as power. Only military strength and advanced technology were power. A human reading history books could not change anything. This was their mistake. After 3 weeks of studying in the library, began to talk with Queen Aura about what he had learned. He did not lecture her. He did not try to teach her. Instead, he asked questions. He asked about decisions she had made. He asked about the Council of Elders and their criticisms. He asked about the species that they had conquered in the past. One evening they were sitting in the Queen's private chamber. The stars were visible through the large windows. Asked her about a species that they had conquered 200 years ago. They now lived in the lower sections of the empire. They did work that they did not want to do. They served thee in many ways. They had accepted their position. Asked the Queen a simple question. Do you think they chose this life? Or did they simply lose the ability to choose? Queen Aura did not answer him immediately. She looked out at the stars. She realized that she had never actually thought about this question before. They served. They did their work. They seemed content with their position. She had assumed that they must have chosen this somehow. She had assumed that they must have understood that serving was the best option available to them. But's question made her think differently. What if they had not chosen? What if they had simply been forced into this position, and then over many years had learned to accept it? What if there was a difference between accepting something because you want to and accepting something because you have no other choice? This thought troubled Queen Aura. She did not like being troubled, but she could not make the thought go away. She began to look at her decisions differently. She began to wonder about the species she ruled and whether they were truly content or whether they were simply surviving. More weeks passed, told the Queen stories about human history. He told her about civilizations that had risen to great power and then collapsed. He spoke about Rome and China and Egypt. He spoke about empires that had believed they would rule forever. He described how these empires had thought they were invincible. He explained how they had eventually fallen because they had not changed, because they had not listened to the people they ruled, because they had believed that their power was permanent. Queen Aura listened carefully. She started to see parallels between these human histories and her own situation. The Council of Elders was like the forces that had brought down those ancient empires. Resistance was building. Change was coming whether she wanted it or not. Also talked about human persistence. He told her about humans who had survived in the worst conditions on Earth. He described how humans had adapted to deserts and mountains and frozen places. He explained how humans did not survive through strength but through cleverness and through an unwillingness to accept defeat. The more time Queen Aura spent with, the more she realized that he was not just a consort. He was an individual. He had thoughts that interested her. He had a perspective that was different from anything she had learned in her education. He was not inferior. He was simply different. This realization confused her and worried her at the same time. The other leaders began to notice that the Queen spent more time with than with her official duties. Some of them whispered that she was becoming weak. Others said that she was wasting her time on a human when she should have been managing the empire. These whispers reached the ears of Elder, who wanted to become the next ruler of the. Elder saw an opportunity. If he could prove that the Queen was weak, if he could show that her ideas about humans were foolish, then he could challenge her authority. He began to plan how he would destroy the Queen's credibility and take her power for himself. Meanwhile, continued to talk with the Queen. He continued to ask questions that made her think. He continued to force her to examine her own assumptions about power and strength and what it meant to be. Queen Ara found that she was becoming dependent on these conversations. She looked forward to them. She felt lost when was not available. She did not understand what was happening to her. She had selected this human to increase her power, but instead, he was changing her in ways she could not control. She was beginning to see the universe differently. She was beginning to doubt things she had always believed were true. Most dangerous of all, she was beginning to see not as a human consort but as an equal being with something valuable to offer. Understood what was happening better than the Queen did. He had not set out to change her intentionally. He had simply been true to himself. He had shared his perspective. He had asked honest questions. In doing this, he had awakened something in her that had been sleeping her entire life. He had awakened her capacity to see beyond what she had been taught to see. He had awakened her ability to doubt and question and think for herself. He knew that this change would have consequences. He did not yet understand how large those consequences would be, but he was ready. Humans had survived impossible things. They had changed the world through persistence and courage. Whatever came next would face it the way he faced everything else. He would persist. He would adapt. He would find a way forward. The crisis came without warning. Elder called for a council meeting. He told Queen Ara that he had an important matter to discuss. The Queen attended the meeting thinking it would be routine business. She was wrong. Elder stood before the council and made a formal accusation. He said that the Queen was wasting resources on human development programs. These programs were expensive. They were not necessary. The humans were already conquered. They should be put to work, not trained and educated. More than this, Elder said that the Queen's focus on humans showed that she was weak. A strong leader would have already discarded the human experiment and moved on to more important matters. The council chamber was silent for a long moment. Then other council members began to speak. Some supported, others remained neutral. The Queen looked around the room and saw that her allies were fewer than she had thought. The power she had once held so firmly was slipping away. She could feel it happening in real time. Elder proposed a motion. The Queen would lose control of the Human Integration Program. A new committee would be established to oversee humanity. The Queen would focus on other empire matters. The motion would be voted on immediately. The Queen stood and defended her position. She argued that the human program was an investment in the future. She explained that humans had shown creative thinking and adaptability. She said that integrating humans into society would strengthen the empire. But her words did not convince anyone. The council voted. The motion passed by a small margin. The Queen had lost her authority over the human program. After the meeting ended, the Queen was alone in her chamber. She did not summon. She did not want to speak to anyone. She sat in the darkness and looked out at the stars. She felt the weight of her failure. Everything she had built was collapsing. The council did not respect her anymore. She had one chance left and she had failed. But had been watching from a distance. He had access to information about the council meetings. He understood what was happening. He knew that the Queen was in trouble. He went to her chamber late at night when most of the ship was sleeping. When entered, the Queen did not turn to look at him. She sat motionless, staring at the stars, came and stood beside her. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Then Queen Ara began to tell him everything. She told him about the council's opposition. She told him about Elder's plan. She told him that she was losing power and soon she might lose everything. She told him about her fear that her vision for the empire would die when took control. This was a moment of real vulnerability. Queen Ara was speaking to not as a superior to an inferior being, but as someone who needed advice from someone she trusted. Listened carefully to every word. When the Queen finished speaking, asked her a question. What if she showed the council something that they could not ignore? What if she demonstrated that humans had value in a way that would force them to reconsider their assumptions about humanity? Queen Ara looked at him with confusion. What could possibly impress the council enough to change their minds? One human. The council was made up of the most powerful leaders in the empire. How could do anything that would matter to them? Spoke quietly. He told the queen that they had always believed that their strength came from superior technology and superior genetics. They believed that power was measured by weapons and military force, but humans measured strength differently. Humans had something that no amount of technology could create. Humans had the ability to believe in success even when success seemed impossible. Humans had hope. This was not a weakness. This was a strength that they did not possess. He explained that the reason humans had not been destroyed during the war was not luck. It was not because the weapons failed. It was because humans refused to accept defeat. Every time they destroyed a human city, the humans continued to fight. Every time they killed human soldiers, more humans stepped forward to take their place. Every time it seemed the war was over, humans found new ways to continue. Told the queen that if she could show the council what true human determination looked like, if she could demonstrate that humans possess something valuable and unique, then the council might change their position. But it would be risky. If he failed, her position would become even worse. The council would see it as proof that her idea had been foolish. Queen Ara considered this. She was already losing. What did she have to lose by trying? She made a decision. She would arrange a demonstration, but it would not be a simple presentation or a speech. It would be something that could not be ignored. It would challenge the council members directly. It would force them to confront what they believed about humans. The queen spent the next week making arrangements. She requested a council meeting with a special agenda. She told them that she would present a new perspective on human capability. She said that this perspective would change how they understood the value of humans in the empire. The council agreed to attend, curious about what the queen would say. As the date of the meeting approached, prepared himself. He studied culture even more intensely. He learned their history in greater detail. He practiced speaking about human history and human nature in ways that would make sense to thinking. He understood that the council would be hostile. They would not want to listen to him. They would want to prove him wrong and prove that the queen was foolish. But had learned something important from his time on the Eternal Dominion. They were not stupid. They were logical. If he could present information in a way that made logical sense, they would have to consider it. They might not like it. They might not agree with it, but they would have to acknowledge that it was worth thinking about. The night before the meeting, could not sleep. He lay in his quarters and thought about what would happen the next day. He thought about the possibility of failure. He thought about what would happen to him if the demonstration failed. Would the queen cast him aside? Would Elder use his failure as evidence that she was unfit to lead? But had lived through a war. He had seen things that were much worse than a failed presentation to a council. He had lost friends and comrades. He had watched his world being destroyed. Compared to that, facing the council was something he could do. He could speak the truth. He could present human nature in a way that was honest and clear. If the council rejected him, it would not be because his words were weak. It would be because they were not willing to hear. The day of the meeting came, dressed in formal clothes that the queen had provided. He walked toward the council chamber, knowing that his actions in the next few hours would change everything about his life and about the relationship between humans and the empire. When walked into the council chamber, several leaders laughed. A human. They were going to listen to a human explain something to them. It seemed absurd. Some of the council members barely looked at him. Others stared with expressions of contempt and amusement, stood in the center of the chamber and waited for silence. Queen Ara sat in her high seat. She did not speak. She had decided to let present his case without her interference. This would either work or it would not. Her support could not help him now. Began to speak in perfect language. He had no accent. He had no hesitation. He spoke with clarity and confidence. He told the council that he understood they were skeptical. He understood that they did not believe a human had anything valuable to teach them. He said that he would not waste their time with empty words. Instead, he would present facts. He began to describe human history. He talked about how humans had survived on a planet that was filled with danger. Earth had harsh weather. It had powerful predators. It had diseases and natural disasters. Every day, humans had to work to survive. This had shaped human nature. Humans had learned to be creative. They had learned to think in new ways. They had learned to never accept that a problem was impossible to solve. Then began to discuss the war between humans and He told the council that he had been a military commander during this war. He had seen the conflict from the human side. He described how the had seemed invincible. The human weapons were weak compared to technology. The human ships were slow. Human soldiers could be killed by weapons easily. By all logic, the war should have ended in days, but it did not. He explained that human commanders had studied They had learned how they fought. They always used superior force to defeat their enemies. They did not expect unconventional strategies. They did not anticipate that enemies would use tactics that made no logical sense. But humans did exactly this. Humans attacked in ways that surprised Humans sacrificed their own soldiers to destroy ships. Humans used their knowledge of Earth to fight in ways that gave them advantage. Gave examples. He described a battle where human soldiers had destroyed a weapons platform by walking into certain death. They knew they would be killed, but by doing this, they had eliminated a platform that was killing their people. The commanders had been confused. Why would soldiers walk to their own death? It made no logical sense. But to humans, protecting others was more important than surviving. This willingness to sacrifice had given humans an edge in battle. He talked about human persistence. When a city was destroyed by forces, the humans in other cities did not surrender. They understood that they might lose, but they continued to fight because the alternative was slavery. When human soldiers were killed, other soldiers took their place. The human supply of determination never ran out. For every loss, there was another human willing to continue the fight. Then shifted his focus. He told the council that humans had something unique. It was not superior technology. It was not genetic enhancement. It was something more fundamental. Humans had the ability to believe in a future that was better than the present, and this belief gave them strength to continue even when the odds were against them. The measured strength by military power and technology. These were important, but humans measured strength differently. Humans measured it by will and by determination, and by the refusal to surrender. Some of the council members began to interrupt him. They said that his words meant nothing. They said that humans had simply been lucky. They said that if they had used more force, humans would have been destroyed completely. Did not argue with them. He simply said that what he was describing was not luck. It was the core of what humans were. Then made an offer. He asked the council to test him. He said that he would compete in any challenge they proposed. If he could succeed in one significant test, then the council would have to acknowledge that humans had capabilities worthy of consideration. If he failed, then the Queen's program would be permanently abandoned. The council could make the decision about his fate. This offer created a stir in the council chamber. Some members thought it was a good idea. Others thought it was a waste of time. But Elder saw an opportunity. This was exactly what he needed. He stood and made a proposal. Let the human compete in the military trials. These were the most demanding tests of military capability that they had created. They were designed for warriors who had been genetically enhanced and trained since childhood. A human would not survive the first hour. If the human failed, as he certainly would, it would prove that the Queen's ideas were foolish. It would prove that humans were weak and worthless. The council voted. They agreed. Accepted the challenge without hesitation. He did not show fear. He did not ask for special treatment. He simply said that he would accept whatever tests the council designed. That evening, returned to his quarters. He knew what the military trials were. He had researched them in the library. The trials consisted of 3 parts. The first was physical combat against trained warriors. The second was strategic and tactical thinking under pressure. The third was command simulation, where he would have to defend against overwhelming military force. Began to prepare. He understood his own limitations. He was stronger than most humans, but he was far weaker than any warrior. He could not win through strength. He would have to use something else. He would have to use the same thing that humans had used in the war: creativity, adaptation, refusal to accept defeat. For 3 days trained, he studied the warriors' combat style. He learned their patterns. He practiced fighting techniques that he had developed during his military service. These techniques were based on using an opponent's strength against them. They required flexibility and timing more than raw power. They were not designed to defeat an opponent through direct confrontation. They were designed to survive and to find openings for attack. The morning of the first trial arrived, was taken to an arena. The entire council watched from elevated seats. Thousands of warriors and officers were present, faced one warrior. The warrior was 2 meters tall. His muscles were large and strong. He had been trained in combat since he was young. When the trial began, the warrior rushed forward. He tried to use his superior strength to quickly defeat, but did not try to stop him. Instead, he moved aside and used the warrior's own momentum against him. The warrior crashed into the ground. He got up and attacked again. This time used a different technique. He bent the warrior's arm in a direction that it could not go. The warrior screamed, released him before the arm broke. The warrior was shocked. He had been hurt by a human. This was not supposed to happen. The warrior attacked with more aggression. For 20 minutes they fought, took damage. His body was hit repeatedly. He bled from several wounds, but he continued to fight. He did not fall. He did not give up. Eventually the trial ended. Had not won, but he had not lost. He had fought an enhanced warrior for a full trial and remained standing. The council was silent. The second trial tested its ability to think strategically. He was placed in a command simulation room. A holographic battlefield appeared around him. He was given control of a small human force. The enemy force was 10 times larger and had superior weapons. His task was to defend a position for as long as possible without losing all of his troops. Studied the terrain carefully. He did not immediately plan an attack. He did not try to directly confront the larger force. Instead, he did something that confused the judges. He began to retreat strategically. He established secondary defensive positions. He created supply lines that could be abandoned. He designed a system where his troops could fall back and regroup instead of fighting a battle they could not win. When the enemy force attacked, it was met with resistance at multiple locations. Just as the enemy was about to overwhelm a position, its forces retreated to the next position. The enemy was forced to spread out its forces across the entire battlefield instead of concentrating them in one area. This slowed down the enemy advance significantly. The doctrine was to use overwhelming force to crush all resistance quickly. The judges did not understand strategy. It seemed weak to retreat. It seemed cowardly, but its approach was working. He was keeping his force intact. He was making the enemy work harder. He was prolonging the battle in a way that violated every military principle. But prolonging the battle worked. As time passed, simulated supply lines delivered reinforcements. His troops remained organized. The enemy force, which should have overwhelmed him in minutes, was still fighting hours later. More of the enemy soldiers had been killed than soldiers. In purely numerical terms, this was still a victory for the enemy. But it was not the swift, crushing victory that they expected. When the simulation ended, had defended his position for 17 hours. The warriors who had tried to defeat him in the first trial were amazed, not because had won, but because he had not been instantly destroyed. He had forced the most powerful military force in the universe to work hard to defeat him. Elder stood and argued that this meant nothing. The simulation was not real. In a real battle, strategy would fail. Real soldiers were not machines. They would panic. They would break, but remained calm. He said that his strategy was based on human military history. It was based on real battles where weaker forces had survived by using intelligence instead of strength. He said that humans had fought using these same principles, and it had worked. The third trial was the most dangerous. It was actual combat simulation, not practice. Was armed with basic human weapons and protective armor. He faced 3 soldiers. These were not warriors from the crowd. These were elite soldiers who had been selected for the trial. They were fast and strong and deadly. The simulation was set to real damage. If was badly injured, he would suffer real injuries. If he was killed, he would die for real. The trial began. The three soldiers attacked immediately. They came at from different angles. He could not fight all three at once. He could not defeat any of them through strength. So did what he did in the war. He adapted. He moved to a position where the three soldiers could not all attack him at once. Two of them were in front. One was behind. Engaged the two in front while keeping his attention on the one behind. When the soldier behind him moved forward, turned and used the other two as a barrier, making them block each other's attacks. The fight was brutal. One of the soldiers hit hard in the chest and felt something break. Another soldier cut his arm and blood poured out. The pain was intense. Could feel his body failing. His breathing became difficult. His movements became slower. Any normal soldier would have stopped fighting, but did not stop. He continued to move. He continued to adapt. He used the environment. He used the soldier's own strength against them. When one soldier tried to hit him with full force, moved slightly, and the soldier's attack hit one of his own teammates instead. The three soldiers began to realize that they could not easily defeat this human. They were stronger. They were faster. They had better training. But they also had more to protect. If they took risks, they could get hurt by each other's attacks. Had nothing to protect except his own body. He was willing to take damage to make them work harder. After 2 hours of fighting, one of the soldiers, a commander named Han, made a decision. He called an end to the trial. In tradition, a warrior did not strike a defeated opponent who refused to surrender. It was dishonorable, was badly hurt. His body was broken. He should have stopped fighting, but he had not. He had continued forward toward the objective point. Han knew what humans called this thing. He had read about it in records of the war. Humans called it courage. He knew it by another name in tradition. It was the quality of a true warrior, and this human had it. Collapsed a few steps from the objective point. The trial was over. He had completed it. He had not been defeated because he had refused to accept defeat. In the council chamber, silence fell like a weight. No one had ever completed the military trials while remaining alive and conscious. No human had ever come close. The judges did not know what to do. Their expectations had been completely shattered. Queen Ara stood. Her voice was strong and clear. She spoke to the council about what they had witnessed. She told them that they had seen humanity's true strength. It was not luck. It was not genetic advantage. It was something that they had learned to ignore because technology could always be improved. But the human quality that had demonstrated could not be manufactured. It could not be engineered. It came from within. She explained that they had always measured strength by power and weapons. But there was another kind of strength. It was the strength to refuse to surrender when surrender seemed logical. It was the strength to believe in a future that seemed impossible. It was the strength to sacrifice everything for something larger than yourself. The Queen made her final statement. She said that if they destroyed this quality in humans, if they forced humans into slavery and control, they would destroy something valuable. They would lose the chance to understand a new form of strength. They would lose the opportunity to grow beyond their own limitations. The council voted. By a narrow margin, the Queen's authority was restored. The human integration program was expanded instead of eliminated. Elder's challenge had backfired. He had tried to prove that humans were worthless and weak. Instead, he had provided the stage to prove that humans possessed something they had forgotten, the unbreakable will to continue fighting for what mattered. Weeks later, recovered in the medical bay. The injuries he had suffered were severe. Several bones had been broken. His internal organs had been damaged. He had lost a large amount of blood. The doctors worked on him for days to repair the damage. When was finally able to walk, Queen Ara came to see him. She did not come as a ruler. She came as someone who wanted to understand. She looked at this human who had changed everything. She realized that her initial calculation had been completely wrong. She had wanted to select a human to use. Instead, she had selected a human who would change her. She took his hand. In that moment, both of them understood something important. The relationship between humans and the would never be the same. It would be based on respect instead of domination. It would be based on recognition of strength in different forms. It would be based on the truth that the Queen had finally learned. Humans were not inferior. They were simply different. And in their difference lay the key to a future that neither species could have imagined alone. The galaxy was changing. The age of domination was ending. A new age was beginning. An age where strength was measured not just in weapons and technology, but in the courage to refuse to surrender, in the will to persist against impossible odds, in the human quality that could never be manufactured or engineered. Grant had shown what it meant to be human, and the Dominion would never be the same.